Good evening, everyone. This week's parsha is Parshas Beshalach, and tonight's Drasha we're going to start in the beginning of the parsha, and then we're actually going to go to the end of the parsha. So the parsha begins. So we're going to first talk about something that we actually touched on this part of this at least on Tuesday night, and this is Perek Gimel Pasuk Yates, chapter 13, verse 19. Vayikach Moshe es atzmes Yosef imai. As the Jewish people were leaving, Moshe took the bones of Yosef with him. Ki ashbea hishbias b'nei Yisrael lemar, for he made the Jewish people swear, saying, Pakod yivkad Elokim eschem, Hashem shall surely remember you, v'alisem es atzmeisem izeh itchem, and you shall bring up my bones from here with you. Okay, so Moshe made sure that he took the remains of Yosef to fulfill the promise the Jewish people made to him before he died. So, as we mentioned, there is our sages cite regarding Moshe's actions here. They bring in the pasuk in Mishlei, Chacham Lev Yikach Mitzvahs. One who is wise of heart will take mitzvahs. Everybody else was involved in taking and asking for the gold and silver from the Egyptians, which as we spoke about Tuesday night, although that too was a mitzvah, but clearly it's a mitzvah that there was a lot of personal gain involved also. And while the Jewish people were doing that, he was being involved in doing mitzvahs. Meaning he was doing a mitzvah, as we say, that had no personal gain involved. So the commentary of the Kli Yakar wants to give an explanation as to what exactly, when the sages brought this down. When the sages brought down this pasuk in Mishlei, applying it to Moshe, that Moshe is the wise of heart who does mitzvahs. And they explained everybody else was borrowing the money, and he was dealing with Yosef's bones. What is the point of what they're trying to do? What were they trying to do with this? What were they trying to answer? What were they trying to bring out? So he says that what the Medrash was trying to answer was trying to explain an extra word in the pasuk. If we go back to the pasuk itself, to the verse itself, the verse reads, Vayikach Moshe atzmes Yosef imai. Moshe took the bones of Yosef with him. Why does it have to say he took them with him? You should just say Moshe took the remains of Yosef. What is that word imai, with him, coming to say? So says the Kli Yakar, it's coming to give the following explanation. We're coming to explain this extra word imai, with him. That is the word that brings out that Moshe was involved in taking care of Yosef's bones and not involved in taking the money from Egypt. Because money is an acquisition that does not stay with you. Because as the pasuk says, your honor, your glory will not go down after you, will not follow you into the grave. But the good deeds, the mitzvahs that a person accumulates in this world, that's something that clings to him, that stays with him in this world and the next world. That's really what stays with a person. That's why the pasuk says Yosef took the bones with him. With him is alluding to the fact that what Yosef was doing was something that would always stay with him, because he was doing a mitzvah. He was doing a mitzvah, as we said, completely for the sake of heaven. The mitzvah that when the Jewish people were taking the money from Egypt, they were, again, accumulating wealth for themselves, and that was what went through their minds. That was part of what they were doing. And therefore, from that aspect of the mitzvah, that doesn't stay with the person. But Yosef was doing something that would completely stay with him. The whole thing, the whole mitzvah in its entirety. Because Yosef was not involved in anything personally for himself, Moshe was not involved in any kind of monetary gain here, which is temporary, but rather he was doing something that was imai, doing something with him. The reason why the Torah gave this extra with him is to allude that Moshe was doing something that would stay completely with him. That is what Yosef was going to do, was going to stay completely with him. to the exclusion of doing something else that doesn't always stay with you. It's only temporarily with you. And that's talking about how Yosef taking the bones of Yosef, Moshe taking the bones of Yosef, would be something that was Imai staying with him, but Moshe didn't get involved, wasn't involved in taking the money from Egypt. That would be something that would not be Imai stay with him. And then the Klei Yakar continues and says, "V'ulai, and perhaps lekach asak dafka b'mitzvah zu." Perhaps Moshe specifically involved himself with this mitzvah now, liyos liyisrael kamasker semamisa, for the purposes of reminding the Jewish people that they're not going to live forever. Ki b'siba zu layu kol kach lahute machar habiza. Because of this, and if this they would have this in mind, they wouldn't be so totally involved, totally what's the word? They wouldn't be so not concentrate. They wouldn't be so, I can't find the right word now. They wouldn't be so involved and so running after the money. When they would be reminded that whatever they're accumulating now isn't going to follow them. It's only temporary. It doesn't stay with a person. So the Klei Yakar is saying that the reason why Moshe got involved now in this mitzvah was because the Jewish people would see what he's doing, that he's being involved in the remains of Yosef. That would remind them that life is temporary. And because of that, they wouldn't be so, so involved and running after the money, because they're being reminded that, there are bigger priorities in life. Being so focused on making the money in light of the fact that we remind ourselves that life is temporary, reminds us that we have more important things in life than to go running after money. And that's what Moshe was trying to show them. Moshe, by doing this now, was reminding them, remember, life is temporary, and therefore don't get so caught up in the money, which if you do means because you're so focused on your life, your physical life in this world. But remember, it's temporary. There are much more important and better things to be involved with than to be running after money, being that the money doesn't stay with you. You could do other things that are going to stay with you eternally and be with you in this world and the next world, referring to the performance of mitzvahs. So what, according to this, we pointed out Tuesday, like that, it's interesting that the Klei Yakar is saying that why did Moshe do this mitzvah specifically now? To impress upon the Jewish people that life is temporary. So we asked that why is he saying this? I mean, to simply put, why did Moshe do this mitzvah specifically now? Because they were leaving Egypt. It was time to leave, and Moshe had to take care of this mitzvah. He had to do it because he promised to do it, and now was the time to do it. Why is the Klei Yakar saying that he did it because of the fact he's trying to remind the Jewish people of the day of death? So he mentioned apparently the Klei Yakar it feels that Moshe could have maybe not just been doing this. We want to suggest that Klei Yakar was answering the question, why didn't Moshe do both? Why couldn't Moshe do some of the borrowing of the utensils and go ahead and then take care of the remains of Yosef? And if that would be the question, the answer would be because Moshe went straight to take care of the bones of Yosef to impress upon the people how, remember, life is temporary. That's why he didn't go to the money. It was a mitzvah to do, but he didn't go do that mitzvah himself because he wanted to impress upon them right away. Remember, life is temporary, and don't get so caught up in trying to make the money. Or perhaps like you said, Arkady, that maybe somebody else could have done it. Maybe somebody else could have done it. Why did Moshe specifically have to do it? The answer is because Moshe was trying to impress upon the people. When the people would see Moshe doing it, that would impress upon Moshe now doing this mitzvah. His doing it would impress upon them the fact that Moshe is involved in the remains of Yosef, which would remind them of the temporariness of life. But the point of the Klei Yakar is to say that Moshe was trying to teach them where their priorities should be. If life is temporary, we don't live forever. And therefore, we have to make sure that we have our priorities in life straight and focus on what really matters and what really counts. There is another lesson like this at the end of the parsha. At the end of the parsha, there's another lesson about getting our priorities straight. And this is in Perek Tesvav, chapter 15, Pasuk Chaf Beis, verse 22. You got it? Vayasa Moshe es Yisrael miyamsuf. Moshe made the Jewish people travel from Yamsuf after the splitting of the Red Sea. Vayetzu amidbar Shur. They went to the desert of Shur. Vayelchu shleish bamidbar. They went 3 days in the desert. They didn't find any water. So the Jewish people have left the Yamsuf. They're going to the desert. They can't find any water. And eventually they found water. The water was bitter. And Moshe was told to throw a piece of wood into the water to make it sweet. Okay. But 1 second. Where are you, Chumash, for a second? No, you're not looking in the right chapter. You're looking at 14. It's supposed to be 15. 15.
Ah, you said 15?
Yeah.
I'm wrong. Okay.
Yeah, okay. So it's chapter 15, Pasuk Chav Beis, verse 22. Okay, so it says that Moshe made them travel from the Yamsuf, and they went there 3 days, and they didn't find any water. So the Kli Yakar again comments on what it means that they didn't find water. They traveled 3 days, they couldn't find water, they were without water. So the Kli Yakar explains this, Mida Keneged Mida, he writes. It's measure for measure. The Jewish people were too involved in taking the money from the Red Sea. Now, what that means is that besides for the Jewish people going to the Egyptians and asking them for their gold and silver before they left Egypt, after the splitting of the Red Sea and the Egyptians were drowned, they had also brought lots of precious stones and gems to decorate their chariots and decorate their horses. And after they're all drowned, all those precious stones and jewels floated came up from the water, and the Jewish people were gathering that too. So they became very wealthy. They became very wealthy from the gold and silver that they took from Egypt, and they also became very wealthy because of all the precious stones and ornaments that had come off the Egyptians and their horses and chariots after the Red Sea had drowned them. So at this point of time, this is the Red Sea had split, the Egyptians were drowned, and the pasuk says, "Vayasa Moshe Yisrael." Moshe made them travel. So the commentaries explain Moshe had to make them travel because they didn't want to leave. They were very busy gathering all the precious gems and stones, and therefore Moshe had to make them leave. Now, with that, it says they went 3 days in the desert. They didn't find water. So says the Kli Yakar that the reason they didn't find water is because it was a punishment, measure for measure. Because they were too involved in gathering all the gold and all the precious stones and from the sea, and they were too involved in that. And from that point, and because of that, at that point, they were not worthy of receiving the Torah that is compared to water. Therefore, they were punished by not finding water. Meaning, not being able to find water was a message to the Jewish people. Water, we find, is compared, the Torah is compared to water. And the point was, by not having water, the point was to teach them that because you made yourselves unworthy of receiving the Torah, and the Torah is compared to water, so now you don't have water. To remind you that you don't have water because you didn't have Torah, which is compared to water. And why don't they have Torah? Because since they were so involved in picking up all the wealth that came up from the splitting of the Red Sea, from the drowning of the Egyptians, they were too involved in that. Because of that, they weren't worthy of receiving the Torah, and therefore, to show them that the problem was that they were lacking Torah because of their too much involvement in gathering all the riches from the Red Sea. Therefore, they are punished not to receive water. Okay, now, so the Kli Yakar then writes a little further. because they're again very involved in gathering the wealth from the Red Sea. And they didn't hurry to go to the desert to receive the Torah. Therefore, they were punished not to receive the water. Because Hashem already told them that when they leave Egypt, they're going to come receive the Torah in Har Sinai. And instead, they basically, once they got free of the Egyptians, instead of saying, okay, let's run and get the Torah, instead, they spent a lot of time, they spent too much, they were too involved in gathering the wealth from the sea. Now, I don't think that means necessarily they shouldn't have gathered it at all, but perhaps they should have just, let me just see the words here again. Right. He says they were involved in gathering the wealth from the sea, and they didn't run to receive the Torah. I don't know if that means they shouldn't have done it at all. They were doing it too much. But the point that the Kli Yakar is saying is, again, the fact that they lacked water was a punishment. It was a punishment measure for measure. It was a lesson to them because of the fact that you were not going for the Torah. And instead, you chose more to be involved in gathering the wealth from the sea, where instead of doing that, you should have been running to receive the Torah, because the Jewish people knew that when they left Egypt, they would receive the Torah. So once they left and they were free of the Egyptians, what should they have wanted to do next? Let's go receive the Torah. But instead, they got very involved in gathering the wealth from the sea, to the point that Moshe had to force them away from the sea to continue traveling. That meant that they were not worthy of the Torah. They didn't show the proper desire for the Torah, and therefore they were punished with a lack of water as a message that you're lacking water because you were lacking Torah, which is compared to water. So again, the lesson that the Jewish people were being given by not having water was, again, you need to get your priorities in life correct. You got to get them straight. You have to know what's important and what's not important. It was not as important to be so involved in gathering the wealth when what you should have been doing is running to receive the Torah. You had the chance to receive the Torah, you should have ran for it and not be so involved in gathering the wealth. That means that you didn't get your priorities right. And therefore, they lacked water as a sign to them to show that because they were lacking in Torah, therefore they would be lacking in the water that's compared to Torah. And again, it's a lesson in getting one's priorities in life straight. So I want to share with you a story. It's a parable of, there was a Jew. He went to the market, to be able to make some money. And, he was there in the marketplace, and he is dealing and he's wheeling, he's dealing, he's haggling, he's trading, he's working day and night to make as much money as he can. And he goes back to his motel room, and he hears a knock on the door. Opens up the door, and who's standing there? His rabbi. And he said to him, "Rabbi, what are you doing here?" He said, "Well, I came to see what you were doing here in town. And I see you're just so involved. All you want to do is just make more and more money." And he started rebuking him, how much, he shouldn't be spending so much time on money, reminding him of how money can corrupt, and he's rebuking him. And the person is like really feeling bad, and he feels so much remorse. He takes the money out of his pocket, he throws it on the floor, he steps on it. And the rabbi says, "What are you doing? Why are you stepping on that money? What's the matter with you? Wasting money? Pick it up and put it back in your pocket." And the man looks at his rabbi and says, "You just told me how terrible money is, and now you're hollering at me about that I'm stepping on the money. I'm showing it doesn't mean anything to me." So the rabbi said, "I'm going to tell you a story. Here's a story in a story. Okay, there were once two farmers, good friends, and one farmer noticed how his friend the next in the morning looked very, very disturbed, very, very bothered. He said to him, "What's the matter?" He said, "Nah, forget it." He pushes him. "Tell me, what's the matter?" And he said, "I had a dream last night. I had a crazy dream last night." So he says, "Must have been pretty bad the way you look." Says, "Tell me about it." "No, it's just a dream." "Tell me about it." He says, "Okay, I had a dream like this. I had a dream that when the new crops grow, whoever eats from those new crops is going to go crazy. The new crops, anybody who eats from the new crops that grow the next year, this coming season, you eat from those crops, you go Meshuggah, you go nuts. So his friend says, you know what? I had the same dream last night. There must be something going on here. So both farmers said, what are we going to do? We don't want to go crazy. But if everybody else is crazy and we're normal, that's not going to be too good either. So what should we do? So one of them said, so they decided they're going to go to the wise men of the town. So they went to the wise men of the town. They told them the dream. And he told them, this is what you should do. Before you eat from the new crop and go crazy, take your belt. Take the rope that you use as a belt and tie a special knot in it and hold it in your hand while you're eating the grain. So by doing that, when you go crazy and you'll see that knot in your hand, you'll say to yourself, what's this knot about? And that will remind you how you used to be normal.
Oh, understood.
You used to be normal. What's the point? So the rabbi said, what's the point? The point is that there are times that we make ourselves crazy and we go crazy. And sometimes when we're so busy trying to make a living and make money, we go crazy. We get way too involved in it. And we need something to remind us not to be crazy or not to go crazy or that we shouldn't be crazy. So you go to the marketplace, you make your money, you got to make your money. And you don't throw it out and waste it. It's not to be wasted. Money has its positive aspects, but just don't go so crazy about it. Don't go so crazy over making money. In life, we get very busy. There are a lot of things in life that make us very busy. And they could drive us crazy. We can get very involved in them and forget the priorities in life. And we have to do something that while we are busy doing the kinds of things that make other people crazy, that we try to remain normal. We try not to get crazy from it. So if the whole world is so busy making money that they go crazy from it, we have to do something to make sure we don't go crazy from it like other people do. So what do we got to do? And crazy means, that's a figurative way of saying getting much too involved in it. So what's the reminder that we have? The reminders that we have are that even if a person spends lots of his day trying to make a living and is working very hard and very involved in it, he still has to do something to remember his priorities in life, what's really important, which is why it's so important for a person to always make sure that they go to minyan every morning and that they make sure to learn every day. Because when you make sure every day to daven with a minyan and you make sure every day to learn Torah, so after the whole day of hard work and you want to take it easy, you want to relax, what do you do instead? You make sure that you daven and you learn Torah. You make sure that you're involved. You make sure you serve Hashem. That is your reminder about what's really important in life. Instead of that reminds you, that keeps you on your feet. That keeps you anchored in what's really important in life. So even if you're in a situation that you have to spend most of your day working and making a living, and you don't have all the time you want for being able to study Torah, but when you make sure that you make sure every day to set aside time for Torah study, and you make sure to go to shul every day, that anchors you. That makes you remember what's really important in life. Now, there are some people, I'm not going to mention their name because I don't think they want me to mention the name, but there are people there's someone recently I was mentioned to me by someone that there's this person, he's got a full-time job, but all the other time that he has, he learns. Every day he makes sure to learn. Every day he has a number of set times to learn. But basically his day is filled with working and learning and taking care of his family. That's, of course, very important also. But the point is, there are some people that they fill any minute that they can with learning because they understand they have to make a living. But the real priority in life is learning Torah, serving Hashem. And not everybody can always has all that time. Not everybody has all the time, like to say that, if I'm not working, I could be learning. Sometimes you're very limited in how much time you have, but that's not the point. The point is not only how much time you have. The point is making sure that you have the time. And when you make sure that you have the time, that means you understand, that helps you understand what the priorities are. And if you understand what your priorities are, you'll find more time to learn. But the point is that we have to make sure that we have our priorities straight, which was what Moshe was trying to teach the Jewish people as they were gathering the money from Egypt. Hashem was trying to tell the Jewish people, by not giving them water, to remember what the priorities in life are, that you should, instead of sitting here and gathering the wealth from the sea, you should have been running to receive the Torah. And we always have to do something to make sure to remember that as busy as we get with other things in life, to remember, we have to make sure that we remember what the priorities are. And we'll remember the priorities in life if we make sure to keep to those priorities. If we make sure that we go to shul every day, we make sure that we study Torah every day, and we study Torah every day with a sense of this is a set time, this is my time set aside for learning. I'm not going to let anything take me away from it. And I'm going to invest a good amount of time. I'm not just going to sit there for a few minutes and do something. I'm going to invest a decent amount of time. Decent amount of time can be an hour, maybe even less. But again, it means that you take that, set aside that time. That time is precious. That time is sacred. You involve yourself in Torah study. You make sure to daven in shul every day. All these things, by doing that, remind us what the priorities in life are and helps us make sure to live by those priorities. Those are the lessons. Those are the two lessons we mentioned before. It's always important to make sure that we get our priorities straight. Have a wonderful Shabbos.
But Torah actually got specific, talk about